There's a conservative group named the American Energy Alliance. They're, of course, pro-fossil fuels, and they're paid by the industry. In fact, they get much of their money from the billionaire Koch brothers. And this group decided to make a point in a blog post by posting a political cartoon with the following caption, quote, "It's clear that the CIA isn't the only government agency that engaged in torture." Now let's look at the cartoon that they posted with that. So for everybody listening on the live show, it says, EPA torture report. Raising energy costs, crushing small business, killing jobs, killing coal industry, harassing property owners. So they're not even attempting to be like clever and nuanced. They're just like, yeah, the CIA tortures, but they're not the only one. The EPA is torturing too because they regulate shit. Regulation is just as bad as torture in my book. Yeah. Really? Regulation is just as bad as torture? So I guess the minimum wage is like torture. I guess child labor laws are like torture. I guess the rules that make it so you can't dump battery acid in a river. Yeah, that's just like torture. Dumping toxic chemicals and carcinogens into the atmosphere, regulating the amount you could do that. It's like torture. What's so funny is the opposite is more like torture. It's more like torture. Like, what was the story? I think it was GE dumping PCBs or whatever they're called, a chemical, into the Hudson River, totally polluting it and destroying it, dumping carcinogens all over the place, making people sick. To allow business to do that is way more like torture than regulating on behalf of the people and saying, okay, you just can't fuck up everything in the environment. So they have it exactly backwards. Now, specifically, these guys go on to mention Obama's new coal and climate change rules as the problem, and they say that that's like torture. It's like torture to do climate change regulation and pollution regulation. So what's the truth about these regulations? They cut 300 million tons of annual CO2 and, quote, drop pollution that causes soot and smog 25% by 2030. The EPA also said it would avoid up to 6,600 premature deaths and 150,000 asthma attacks in children. When you lower CO2 emissions from coal-fired power plants, you also lower the emissions of other pollutants like nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, mercury, and sulfur dioxide. So, what do the facts show here? The facts show, yet again, the torture is not done by environmental regulators. The real torture is done if there are no environmental regulators, which is exactly what this group wants to happen. That's their ideal. That's their utopia. Well, guess what? The facts show it that if they get their way, 150,000 more people will have asthma attacks, so I guess these guys are pro-asthma attacks, and 6,600 people will die prematurely. So I guess these guys want to murder 6,600 people. They are pro-murder. This group is in favor of murder. They're genocidal maniacs. Oh, see, they don't like the hyperbole when it's flipped back on them. And guess what? Our hyperbole is much closer to the truth than their fucking hyperbole, which is just totally made up, and they say, there's a link between the CIA and the EPA, because the CIA tortured people, and the EPA is torturing people. Yeah, the CIA also has 3 letters, CIA, and the EPA does too. EPA. See, they're exactly alike, and they both torture.